stories? Good, because we've already had a lot of stories today, but I'm going to be telling you some more. But before I start the storytelling, I will just tell you very, very quickly my journey into how I became a storyteller. Because sometimes people will say, yeah, what do you do? Oh, I'm a storyteller. You're a storyteller? What does that mean? What does a storyteller do? And they sometimes don't believe that my job is to tell stories. And actually, I don't think I can do anything else. I'm not gifted in anything else. But yeah, I started my journey in storytelling when I was small, when I grew up in Kenya. And we lived in a very rural part of Kenya. When I'm a country bumpkin. I like the rural life. And my grandmother and my mother would always tell me stories because we never had a TV. My mother was very suspicious about television. So we were allowed to go to the local hotel for 1 hour on a Wednesday evening because she knew what was going to be on. So that was how I learned a lot of stories. And then when I was a young teenager, we moved to Scotland. And Scotland, of course, the storytelling went, new things came because now we had a TV. And then we had, you know, when you go to school and then you have after-school clubs and things, which we never used to do in Kenya. So suddenly life was different. And it was only when I became pregnant, when my husband and I were expecting our first child. And I thought, this kid is going to be in Scotland, and the culture will be okay, Scottish culture. But I didn't want the child to not know its African heritage. Because, you know, you leave Africa, you become African. Even though before I left, I didn't know anything about being African. So I decided, how am I going to do this? The best way is through stories. So I thought, let me find some books. Could I find a book of Kenyan stories? No. So I thought, I know all these stories, so I wrote a book. I found an illustrator. I set up a publishing company. You don't know this, Lola, I don't think. It's gone now because I'm not a publisher. But I set up a publishing company, and I printed 1,000 copies of my book. Oh, you know that feeling when the box arrives? And you open it, oh, it was a good feeling. And then my friends and my family bought a book, and then I still had 900 and something, you know. So I thought, how am I going to shift these? So then I started to hire halls and centers, and I would invite people to hear the story, and then I would try to sell my book. And it was somebody who came and said, oh, you should meet this other storyteller. And so I did. I met this storyteller, and I didn't know that I was storytelling. And then suddenly, I was immersed in this world of storytelling, which I never knew existed before. I didn't even know storytelling was a thing. So Scotland, I began to realize the way they use their stories is incredible. It's a very, very powerful tool because personally, stories affect us deeply. We're proud of where we come from, our families, who we inspire to be because of stories. Socially, when you know the film Braveheart? Yeah, William Wallace and the Scots, freedom! You know, it unites the Scottish people as a nation. But then also, the Scots know how stories have economic value as well. So we all know Loch Ness Monster, Nessie. See, it's a story. Hundreds of years ago, for those who don't know, somebody saw something swimming in the water. They said, there's something. I swear there's something in the water. Then 10 years passed. Somebody else said, oh, I saw it. I saw something in the water. And then photography was invented, and somebody took a photograph, and it was the head and the neck of a snake creature coming out of this lake. So now there's evidence that there's something in the water. So this one story, hundreds of years old, but it's not only a story, it's also a multi-million-pound business that's very good for government. It's also very good for the woman who sells food at the side of the lake, for the person who has a hotel, because all the tourists are coming. So from one story, it has many, many multiple effects. And Edinburgh, for those of you who've been to Edinburgh, I love Edinburgh, and you see statues and sculptures and stories upon stories everywhere, although I have a problem with Edinburgh, because for those of you who've been, if you look around, if you ever go, there are more statues of dogs than there are of women. Imagine, yeah. So, yeah, Edinburgh is wonderful. However, we need something to correct. So, stories have such incredible value. And one of the things that bothers me about the storytelling that happens across the African continent, something I'm very passionate about, is that we don't value our stories very much. We can go anywhere, and if I come to Nigeria, it's not easy for me to come and just see stories everywhere. Yeah? So if people come to Kenya, nobody knows any Kenyan stories at all. unless they've heard Washu this morning. At least now you know one. You know one story. So if people, the majority of Kenyans, they don't read because books are either expensive or inaccessible, or the way that they teach in school, books are made very, very boring. There's always, and the moral of the story is, which kills a story. And so people generally don't read, but also the storytelling is dying. So if people are not reading stories, if people are not hearing stories, then, as somebody said this morning in that very, very first session, the stories are who we are. So if we don't have our own stories, then who do we become? We become a lost people. So for me, storytelling, in answer, is African literature, does it matter? African storytelling also matters too. So I'm going to tell my first story. And this story is a story from Zimbabwe. It was told to me by a Shona storyteller. And it's a story about the cat. I've not seen any cats in Kaduna, but I presume you have cats here. Yeah? And the cats, see, they live in the homesteads, yes? So a long time ago, no cats lived with the humans. All the cats in the world were wild cats. They lived out in the plains, and they hunted in packs. And there was one cat, and she did not like this lifestyle at all. She hated having to wake up and then chase after all these animals. She hated the conversations because they always revolved around who was the strongest, who was the fastest, who was the mightiest hunter. She thought, surely there must be more to life than this. So she decided, leave the pack behind, and she would go off in search of the most wonderful creature in the world. And so she left, all on her own. And for 3 days, she wandered around until one day, when she was there sitting in the grass, her ears pricked up, and she peered over because she could hear an antelope racing towards her. And her instinct was to chase after it. But she decided to just watch, just see this antelope for the first time. And as she was watching, she thought, look at those long legs. Look at that smooth, glossy coat. Look at those big, beautiful brown eyes. Maybe the antelope is the most wonderful creature in the world. And so she went to live with the antelope. And what a time they had. The antelope showed her how to leap and dance and spin for fun. The antelope showed her how to walk like a dancer with such elegance and grace. And the cat loved antelope. But one day, they went for a walk in the forest. There was a rustling in the bushes. And then suddenly, lion leapt out, and antelope was off like a shot. And Wildcat, she called out, come back, my beautiful antelope. But antelope was gone. And Wildcat, she was heartbroken. But then, she looked at Lion, and she thought, wait a minute. Look at that glossy mane. Oh, look at those big muscles. Oh, yes. Oh, look at those sharp teeth. Oh, yes. Oh, maybe the lion is the most wonderful creature in the world. And she went to live with the lion. Such arrogance and pride he had. He showed her how to laze under the acacia tree, how to wait for food to be brought. He showed her how to walk as if the world belonged to her. And she loved lion. But one day, they went for a walk in the forest. There was a rustling in the bushes. And then suddenly, elephant stomped out. And lion, he crouched down low. He bared his teeth. His claws were out. But elephant had no time for such silly nonsense. Elephant was the king of the forest. Lion kept trying to warn him off, keep him away. But elephant kept on approaching until just as he was about to stamp on lion, lion took off and ran away. But where are you going? Oh, come back, my beautiful lion. But Lion was gone, and poor Wildcat, she felt terrible until she looked at Elephant and she thought, wait a minute. Look, at that thick skin. Look at those magnificent tusks. Look at the wisdom in those eyes. Look at the size and scale of Elephant. Maybe Elephant is the most wonderful creature in the world. And so she went to live with Elephant. They loved each other. Elephant would take her for walks just as the sun was setting. And when they looked up at night and saw the stars sparkling, Elephant would tell her stories and songs from ancient times. And little Wildcat, she began to dream and imagine in ways that she had never thought possible. She loved Elephant. But one day, they went for a walk in the forest. There was a rustling in the bushes. And then, whoosh, there was a strange sound. An elephant, he began to sway from side to side. And then, bam, he crashed. And in the distance, the Wildcat saw the hunter. And the hunter, he had a bow and an arrow. And Wildcat thought, oh my goodness, look at that small creature over there. But he's used his intelligence, his creativity, his imagination to create something that will fell the mighty king of the forest. Maybe the hunter is the most wonderful creature in the world. And so she went to live with the hunter. But one day, she heard a terrible sound. There was clattering and clanging and shouting and yelling, and she looked to see what was going on. And there, in the doorway, she saw a woman. And she knew she had definitely found the most wonderful creature in the world. Thank you. So I thought that today I'm going to tell you 3 stories in total. We'll see how we go. So that is one. And the second one I'm going to tell you is another story from Kenya. So we're going Zimbabwe, we're going Kenya. And this story was told to me by a Kenyan storyteller who had also heard it from another storyteller who had also heard it from a storyteller in Ethiopia. So, you know, stories, they have a way of traveling, yeah? So we'll find stories maybe in Nigeria that are very similar to stories in Kenya, that are similar to stories in South Africa, that are similar to stories in India, that are similar to stories anywhere. So stories have this wonderful way of moving. So I don't know the origins of it, but I have Kenyanized it in my own way. So it's a story about a woman, and she was preparing a delicious meal for her family. And you know, family is not just mother, father, and the kids. Who else is coming? Yeah, the cousins are coming. Second cousins. The neighbors. Mother-in-law. If you forget the mother-in-law, there's trouble. Oh. Who else? The church were coming. Yeah, everybody was coming. So she had a huge pot. And into that pot, she poured in her water. She threw in the vegetables that she had already prepared. She had her seasoning. And she had a big piece of meat wrapped around a thick bone. You know the kind with the marrow in the middle? Oh, yes. She put that in, and she took her stick, her mwiko, and she stirred, and she stirred. And every now and again, she would taste it. And when she was satisfied that this meal was good enough for her family, she took out the bone. She scraped off all that meat. She took the marrow for herself. A little bit she let slip in. And then she saw that the window was open. So without giving it a second thought, she threw the bone out of the window. But at that moment, there was a dog outside. And this dog was tortured by this delicious smell. Oh, where is it coming from? Oh, I'm so hungry. And he was sniffing round and round when suddenly, something landed at his feet. And it was a bone. Oh, hallelujah! He cried. He jumped on the bone. He started to chew. He was enjoying this bone so much, so juicy, oh, so gristly, so delicious. When another dog from the village across the way came down that street, and he saw the first dog with a bone, and what did he want? He wanted that bone. So he began to circle round and round, looking for that moment when he could pounce and grab that bone. His bone, he thought. But the first dog, was he going to give it up? No, of course not. So he bared his teeth and he tried to protect his bone. And the second dog spotted an opportunity. He pounced, and it wasn't long before the two dogs were fighting. They were scratching each other, nipping, biting at each other, clawing at each other, rolling on the ground. There was an old man watching. Mzee Chomba. Mzee Chomba, Mzee Chomba, Mzee Chomba, Mzee Chomba, aliona kila kitu kutoka dirishani, which means he saw everything from his window. Stop those two dogs from fighting, because if you don't, the boys will fight. Nobody listened to old Mzee Chomba. And as the dogs kept on fighting, there was a boy on his way home from school. Oh, he was in such a good mood. School was finished. He'd done so well. He was number one. Oh, he was so happy. He was going home to tell his family. And then he saw the two dogs fighting. And he began to move away and inch past, because he had been told, never go near fighting dogs, because what? Yeah, they'll bite you. You might get hurt. But as he was moving past them, he saw one of those dogs was his dog. His fear disappeared. He raced forward. He grabbed hold of the other dog. Get off my dog! Ugh! And he started to beat the second dog. But at that moment, there was another boy on his way home from school. And oh, this boy was happy because he'd had a tough day at school. He was happy to be away, happy to be going home. He could go play with his friends. When he saw a boy beating up a dog, and this was terrible. This boy adored animals, and this was animal cruelty. And when he got closer, he realized with horror that that dog was his dog. Oh, he was furious. He flew forward as fast as he could. And it wasn't long before the two boys were fighting. They were punching each other, kicking each other, attacking each other, wrestling each other. Mzee Chomba, Mzee Chomba, Mzee Chomba, Mzee Chomba, aliona kila kitu kutoka dirishani. Stop those two boys from fighting. Because if you don't, the women will fight. Nobody listened to old Mzee Chomba. And sure enough, there was a woman walking down the road. She was coming home from the market, and she had her baskets empty. She had sold everything. She had her money hidden away. She was going home. Oh, yes, she was in such a good mood when suddenly she saw the two boys fighting. Young people today, all they do is hang around and fight each other. What is this world coming to? No. Do I believe my eyes? That's my son! Oh, she recognized her baby, her angel, the light of her life, a beautiful child who could do no wrong. And there was this ragamuffin attacking him, beating him up. Was she happy? No! Yeah, you, get off my boy, Is this what your mother teaches you, I bet you didn't even go to school, Yeah, be quivering, be trembling, be shaking with fear. What do you think you're doing? Oh. But at that moment, there was another woman walking down the road. This woman, her baskets were full. She had no money left. She'd had her hair done. She got a nice new dress. She was looking good. She was feeling even better when suddenly she saw the woman beating up a boy. That boy must have done something so terrible to warrant such a beating. Huh? No. What? That's my son! Oh, the woman, she flew forward. She was not happy at all. Huh? Lady, huh? You, come here. Come now. Get up here. Uh-huh. Yeah. You think you go around, eh? Let me take these earrings out, eh? You go around attacking boys, huh? Let's go. Let's go, lady. It wasn't long before the two women were fighting. Oh, it was brutal. Mzee Chomba, Mzee Chomba, Mzee Chomba, Mzee Chomba, aliona kila kitu kutoka dirishani. Stop those two women from fighting. Because if you don't, the men will fight. Did anybody listen to old Mzee Chomba? No, of course not. And a few moments later, there were two men walking down the street. Please come be my one man. Uh-huh. Yeah, you come and be my other man. Yes, come. These two men. Oh, no. Come. They were very good friends, and sometimes after work, they would go somewhere to relax. Where do they normally go to relax? The pub. So, I know you've probably never, ever been drunk in your life. Not yet. He's too eager. Now, you must pretend, it will just use your mind, pretend that you are drunk, okay? You're going home, when suddenly you see somebody fighting. Who is it? Yeah. Reply, answer him. Is it not embarrassing? Would your wives do something like that? Would your wives do that? But his also doesn't fight, huh? But as the men approached, they realized something. What do you realize? Oh, the two men began to accuse each other, and then they started to fight. You're still friends. Come on, be fighting now. Your fight, yes. The battle. Oh. No. Let's try some slow motion. Let's get real. Oh. That's not slow motion. Thank you. Well done. The two men tried to fight each other as best as two drunk men can fight. They were trying to land blows. They were trying to push each other down. They were rolling. They were kicking. They were, terrible. Mzee Chomba, Mzee Chomba, Mzee Chomba, Mzee Chomba, aliona kila kitu kutoka dirishani. Stop those two men from fighting. Because if you don't, the villages will fight. Nobody listened to old Mzee Chomba. And a little while later, somebody joined in, one of their friends. Yeah, pew. And then somebody else. But then the person who came after that decided to bring a stone. Whoosh. The person who came after that decided to bring a stick. Cha. But the person who came after that decided to bring a blade. And the fighting, it began to change. It wasn't just an innocent punch-up anymore. Soon people were really getting hurt, and nobody knew what to do. More and more people began to join in, and soon the violence was escalating, and they said, "Oh, please, if you guys just apologize, accept responsibility, we will forgive you and it will all be fine." But the elders of the other village said, we would apologize if we started it. But we would never start something like that. We are civilized. Civilized. We saw you attacking our old people. But we saw you burn down our houses. We saw you go into our fields and destroy our crops. We saw you, including the children, in the fight. And the accusations, they flew back and forth. Nobody accepted responsibility. And soon the villages, they were in danger of destroying each other. And it was then that an old figure came shuffling down the road. And it was Chomba. And he said, "I will tell you who is responsible. You are responsible. Definitely you and you and you and you and all of us are responsible. Because at every moment, leading up to this moment, every single one of us could have stopped it and nobody did. So we are all responsible." And when they heard that, they realized that he was right and the villagers were ashamed. So they decided to build a fire between the villages. And that night, everybody, from the youngest to the oldest, came with something of value, a sacrifice to bring peace. Whether it was a pair of shoes or a toy or a jewelry or clothing, anything at all. And they gathered around that fire and everybody threw in their items. And the fire consumed everything. And when it had died down and there was only ash left, the villagers went home and peace did return. And so the moral of this story is no matter what we do, we must always be very careful before we throw any bones out of any windows. I'll just leave that there. We all have our own bones, huh? Yeah. So this is the last story that I will tell. And it's a story that, I don't know, this is the story that Lola invited me to come and tell in Ake last year. So she keeps inviting me, which is very nice, so thank you, Lola. And it's a story that I was actually very nervous about telling at Ake because it's a story that originated in Nigeria. And telling a Nigerian story in Scotland to Scottish people is different to telling a Nigerian story to Nigerians. So I was a bit anxious, okay, how are they going to take this Kenyan storyteller telling their story? But actually, it's a lost story. And it's a story that I found in Cuba. And sometimes when we tell stories, the journey of the story is as interesting as the story itself. And so this story was carried across hundreds of years ago during the slave trade. And the people were not allowed to keep their names, to keep anything about their culture. But stories and songs, they don't die easily. And so these stories were carried across with the people. And these are stories from the Yoruba people. And so when they reached the other side and the stories were being told, a lot of the orishas that were in these stories were hidden behind the Catholic saints because people were not allowed to practice their faith. And so this resulted in people worshiping the Virgin Mary, but behind the Virgin Mary, there's Yamaja. And so on and so on and so on, and the syncretic faiths in Cuba of Santeria. So this is a story that is in Cuba, and it's one of the major deities in Cuba today, but is not commonly known in Nigeria today. So this is the story. Leiris made the same decision every day of her life. She chose to survive. And survival comes in many, many forms. She survived by doing exactly what she was told to do whenever she was told to do it. She survived by remaining silent whenever her master came at her and tore into her. She survived by refusing to acknowledge that the black bodies hanging from the trees were human beings. She survived by turning away whenever the new workers arrived, because she knew that if she looked at them, they would see their fear reflected in her eyes, and that would break her heart. And Laris had learned the art of survival from the very best, her own mother. But one day, as Laris was walking through the sugarcane plantation, she came across a millipede, and she took a stick and she poked the millipede. And what did the millipede do? Yeah, it coiled up into a ball. And in that moment, she began to reflect that that millipede is like the snail that retreats into its shell. That millipede is like the hedgehog that curls itself into a ball to protect itself. And she realized that it was just like herself. She retreated and kept herself hidden in a shell. And she thought, I don't want to live like this anymore. I want to laugh without having to cover my face. I want to run and feel the wind. And so that night, Laris made a different decision. She waited until the only sound that she could hear was the sound of people sleeping. And then she got up. She crept over those sleeping bodies and she headed towards the door. She opened it quietly and she crept outside and crouched down low. She looked around, and when she saw that nobody was watching, she picked herself up and she started to make her way to the long grass. And when she reached the long grass, she started to run. She ran and she ran until she hit the sugarcane fields. And then she raised herself up and she raced as fast as she could. She was running so fast that she did not feel the stones under her feet. She was running so fast, she did not feel the razor-sharp leaves cutting her skin. She ran and she ran until she was through the forest, over the mountains, across the rivers. She ran until her lungs were almost bursting, but she kept on going until she reached the sea. And there was nowhere else to run. And she sank to the sand. But the moment that you stop chasing what is in you to chase is the moment that fear and doubt creep in. Laris, are you strong enough? Laris, are you brave enough? Laris, was it really that bad after all? And as she was struggling with her thoughts, she felt a hand on her shoulder and she turned and she was looking into the eyes of an old woman, a woman who just looked like her. And the old woman asked, "Why are you here?" And Laris poured out her story. And the old woman held her and listened. And when she had finished, she said, "We all must make choices. And sometimes the choices we make are the right ones, and sometimes they are the wrong ones. And sometimes we don't know if the decision that we are making is the right one or the wrong one. But regardless, we must live with the consequences. But you don't have to make that decision alone, because you have a home across the oceans and among the stars. And for help, all you have to do is to listen. 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 And the old woman told Laris this story. There was once a hunter, some say the finest that the world has ever known. And his name was Ochosi. What was his name? Ochosi. What was his name? Ochosi. And he lived in the middle of the forest, a beautiful forest that he loved and respected. He knew every single tree. And whenever the trees saw him approach, they would sigh and bow towards him. And Ochosi was such a fine hunter that he knew whenever he released his arrow, it would hit the mark. He knew that wherever he placed his traps, he would return and find his intended prey captured within. He knew that when he went down to the river and he cast his nets, he would pull in the finest, fattest, most succulent fish. He was a fine hunter. But he was a man with a dream. The thing that he wanted more than anything else in the world was to become one of the Orishas. And every morning, he would throw himself to the ground. Please, please, let me join Yemaja in your service. Send me a sign. But no sign ever came. And so he had to content himself doing what needed to be done. He would hunt, he would pray, and he would visit his beloved mother who lived on the other side of the forest. But one day, he was feeling a bit hungry. And so he went out and he found some game. And as he was roasting this antelope, in front of his house, that delicious aroma began to pervade the forest air. And it reached the nostrils of Elegba, master of destiny, gods of the fork in the road. And he approached and he said, "Let me join you for dinner." "Yes, please, you are welcome. Oh, let me wash your hands, let me wash your feet. Please drink and dine with me." And the two of them ate, and the two of them enjoyed each other's company and told each other story after story. And Elegba told Ochosi of a party that was taking place in Orun in 3 days' time. He listened. He could imagine every tiny detail. He could picture every scene. But he knew that in his heart, he could never go because he was just a man. And as Elegba was leaving, he said, "Maybe you can help. I'm looking for a gift for the Creator. But I want this gift to be magnificent, exquisite, something that has never been gifted before, something that will make everybody be so impressed, will make everyone go, wow! Something that will please the Creator. Can you help?" And Ochosi, he thought, this is my moment. This is how I can please the Orishas. This is it. And he thought, what can I do? What can I suggest? And he remembered that in the forest, there was a bird. And this bird was the most beautiful bird that had ever existed. Its colors were every shade of the rainbow. Pinks and greens, purples, oranges, reds, yellows. It was beautiful, and its voice was sweeter than honey. And this bird would make the perfect gift for the Creator. When Elegba heard this, he was delighted and he said, "Yes, I will return in 3 days. The bird must be ready." Off he went. And Ochosi, oh yes, he had found a way to please the Orishas. He went to sleep confident that in the morning, first thing, he would find that bird. He woke up, he took his traps, he went into the forest, and he placed them down. He went home to relax, waiting, dreaming of the impending glory. And when he returned a few hours later, every single trap was empty. And this had never, ever happened to him before, ever. And for the first time, he felt panic inside. He gathered his traps and he went to a new part of the forest. He placed the traps down and anxiously, he went home and he waited. He waited, and after some hours, he returned. Empty. Empty. All of them empty. By now, he was terrified. If he failed, who would respect him, huh? They would say, "Oh, there's Ochosi. Oh, the hunter. The one who could not hunt." This could never happen. He was seized with such panic. He gathered his traps. He went to the furthest reaches of the forest. He placed the traps down and he prayed with such fervor that tears were streaming down his face. "Please, this is when I need you most. This is when I need you most. Please help me." And he returned home and he waited. After some hours, he came back empty, empty. But in the last one, in the last trap, there was the bird. It was magnificent, beautiful, oh, exquisite, more beautiful than he could imagine. Every color reflecting the rays of the sun. It sparkled, it shimmered. It was magnificent. It opened its little beak and the most beautiful sound. He took that bird. He placed it in his bag and he went home. He put it in a cage in a shelf and he locked the door. And then he looked around for some grain. But there was no grain in the house. That bird had to be in perfect condition. He can't send a hungry bird. So he left his house to go and find the grain. But while he was gone, he had a visitor. Oh, you know who's coming to visit? Yes, his mother. What you see? Huh? What you see? This boy. Every time I come to see him, he is not here. Where has he gone, huh? What is going on? How can he treat his mother this way? Would your child treat you like this? No! Oh, how have I been cursed with such a son? And look at the state of this house, huh? Would you stay in a house that looked like this? No, of course not. Look at things lying here, there, if only he had a wife. Oh, but my boy, he's such a good man. He's a hunter, the finest hunter in the entire world. I'm going to make a meal for him. Oh, a mother's love. What can I make? Kilichi. Mm-hmm. What's the other one? The pulled one? The can. That's the one. Some egusi, maybe some. To. Jollof rice, but none of that Ghanaian nonsense. None of that. Some proper rice. Mm-hmm. Yes. A delicious, tasty meal for my baby. Oh, for my boy. Oh, he's going to eat like a king. And so she was looking around when, oh, look at that bird. Oh, a bird this beautiful will have the most delicious meat. She started to pluck the feathers from the neck. She took the knife, hunter's house, plenty of sharp knives, Whoosh, she began to prepare the bird. Oh, she was singing and singing. What song would you sing when you're preparing for your loved ones? Sing for me. Sing. I'm preparing a meal. Oh, yeah. Oh, she was enjoying herself. This meal for her beautiful son, huh? But as she was cutting it and boiling it and preparing, she started to look for the seasoning. Where's the seasoning? Imagine. This house, no seasoning. Huh? Can you live in a house with no salt? No. Oh, no spices, no pepper. Can you live like this? No! Oh, how is my son going to find a wife when he cannot even find a bit of salt? So she left to her house to go and bring some seasoning so she could make a really good, delicious meal for her son. But of course, while she had gone, who returned? Oh, he came back. He immediately saw that the cage was empty, the bird was gone. The door had been opened. Somebody has stolen my bird. What am I going to do? Oh, no. And it's just a few hours until Eligba was going to arrive. He gathered his traps. Oh, please. He ran back into the forest. He placed the traps down near where he had found the bird. He was on his knees. Please, anything I will do for you. Please, take my life now. Just give me the bird. And do you know? The sound of a bird flying through the branches of the trees. It landed on his shoulder. It was the mate of the first bird. He took it. It was beautiful. He put it in his bag. He raced home. He placed it in the cage. He fed it the grain, and he did not take his eyes off it. And a few hours later, Elegba arrived. When he saw the bird, he was delighted. He had never seen anything so beautiful. He said, "That is the perfect gift for the Creator." Oh, Chosi, I am so happy. I am not going to take credit for this alone. No, you have to come to Orun with me. What? Me? Me? Yes! Oh, thank you! Yes, yes! He fell on the ground. He got himself up. Me? Oh, thank you! He oiled himself until he shone like the stars. He combed out his hair till it radiated and glowed like the halo. He wore his finest robes. And when he was ready, the two of them walked into the forest to the ladder of light that led to Orun. And when he arrived, it was so beautiful. Colors that he had never seen before. The sound of music, instruments that he had never imagined before. The orishas were floating around. Imagine gliding, not even needing to walk. Their robes were magnificent. Perfection everywhere. The aroma of their delicious foods. It was incredible. And then the giving of the gifts began. And each gift was taken and appreciated and placed to one side. And when the Creator saw the bird, he said, "Who is this?" And Elegba stepped forward. And he said, "It was this man, Ochosi, who found the bird." Ochosi was summoned before the Creator. Now just imagine that you're summoned before the Creator. Huh? How are you going to feel, huh? Ochosi, he didn't know how to feel. He was terrified, excited, full of joy. And he thought, how do I get to the Creator? Do I crawl on the ground? Or do I walk strong and tall? Do I lower my eyes? What do I do? What do I do? He was panicking inside. But somehow he made it before the Creator. And he looked at him. And he said, "Ochosi, I am pleased with this gift that you have found for me. And I have seen you in that forest. And I know how much you love and respect it. And I have heard your request. And because I am so pleased with this bird, I'm going to honor your request. From this moment on, you will be known as Ochosi, the Orisha of the hunt." The hunt? Yes, me. Oh, thank you. He fell to the ground. Tears of joy were streaming down his face. And after he had leapt up and began to embrace everybody around him, he was summoned once again. Now that you are one of us, let me give you a gift. Anything you want is yours. But Ochosi thought, I don't want anything. This is the only thing that I have ever wanted. The only thing I've ever dreamt about or needed or craved. This is it. But then he began to think of how much he had wanted it. How much he had prayed for it, breathed it, dreamt it, spoke it, wished it into being. And he remembered how close he had come to having none of it at all. Somebody had stolen his bird. And if by some miracle the other one had not landed on his shoulder, he would still be Ochosi, the man in the middle of the forest. So he knew what he wanted. When I released my arrow, I wanted to pierce the heart of the person who stole my bird. But the Creator knows everything. And he said, I ask that you reconsider your request. But by now, Ochosi was fired up. Yes, that is what I want. I don't want anything else. When I released my arrow, It must pierce the heart of the person who stole my bird. And the Creator granted his request. The arrow flew through the skies and the clouds and the forest and the trees and straight into the heart of his mother. And she clutched the arrow as it entered, and she fell backwards to the ground, and her eyes looked to heaven, and her cries carried higher and higher until they reached the ears of Ochosi, and he recognized her voice. No, please. No, please, I don't want this. I don't want any of it. No, take it back, please. I beg you, anything else. I don't want to be here. I just want things to be as they were. Please, I beg you. But the Creator does not turn back time. And as Ochosi lay on the ground, tears of pain streaming down his face, the Creator waited until finally he was raised up. And he spoke and he said, Ochosi, you have seen firsthand that you must never judge one action on one truth alone. You must examine every single truth surrounding every action. And because of that, and this painful lesson you have learned, you will not only be the Orisha of the hunt, but also the Orisha of justice. And to find those truths, all you have to do is to listen. 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 The old woman told Lairi story after story after story, and she listened to each one. And then she passed them on to her children, who passed them on to their children, who passed them on to their children. And across the New World, the Caribbean, the Americas today, you still find people who tell all of these stories, and they are the ones who chose to listen. Thank you.